Looking for a new pair of cowboy boots? Check out Tecovas. Tecovas is a Western wear company, and they're opening a store at the King of Prussia Mall this month. Tecovas boots are handmade and known for being stylish and comfortable. Some of these cowboy boots remind me of what my grandpa Willie would wear when he rode his horse and taught inner city kids all about cowboy life. The Tecovas grand opening party will be Friday, June 28th through Sunday the 30th. Grab a drink and get fitted by a pro. Find out more and see what catches your eye at tecovas.com. That's TECOVAS.com. See y'all there. Today on CityCast Philly. Whether you love the Eagles, Phillies, Flyers, or Sixers, one thing is clear. We're a very sports-oriented city. But is there something missing in our sports culture? I'm talking with an urban policy specialist who thinks there is. It's Monday, June 17th. I'm Trenae Nuri, and here's what Philly's talking about. Diana Lind, writer and urban policy specialist. Thanks for joining me on CityCast Philly.
Thanks for having me.
Let's jump right into it. I want to know your takes on Philly sports culture. We obviously love our sports teams here, but in a recent article published in the Philadelphia Citizen, you said that the way we think about sports culture is limiting. What do you mean by that?
Sure. Yeah. As you mentioned, Philadelphians do love their sports. And we're certainly a city where I think when you think about sports, you think about the big professional sports teams that we have here. I do think that there is room, though, to kind of expand the culture of recreation that we have here in the city. And especially as we think about how we're contemplating not just one, but possibly two new stadium districts. You know, how could we potentially bridge these big developments with the sort of more commonplace everyday recreation that people experience in the city? You know, there could be a way in which we try to build more of a culture of recreation in the city, whether that's, you know, through a city role within the city government, or it's through, you know, other kinds of programs and more strategic thinking about these opportunities that are coming down the pike and how they might filter out to everyday Philadelphians.
Why is the culture of sports and recreation important for you?
You know, I think about it through my own personal lens as somebody who is just trying to get my steps in every day.
Right.
But I also think about it, I have two young sons, and that really kind of changed my relationship in the city to sports. We're really lucky. We live near a ball field. I think about, you know, how many regular Philadelphians don't have that kind of in their backyard. And so there are ways in which I think actually we could, you know, better maximize opportunities for Philadelphians within, you know, our public spaces and not just public spaces, to think about recreation also just on our streets.
Right. You also proposed that maybe our city should create a role of a sports mayor, and that, you know, lit me up. So tell me, like, what would you imagine that this sports mayor would do?
Sure. We have different departments, say, like, for example, the Department of Sustainability in the city, which looks at everything in the city through the lens of sustainability. And I could imagine there being a role that kind of looks at everything through the lens of sports, right? So would look at, you know, streets, would look at public health, would look at the commerce and the economy in the city through the lens of sports. And I think, you know, especially at the time that we are right now, looking at two potential stadium districts, thinking about 2026 as actually being this really big year for us in terms of sports, with hosting the World Cup, but we're also going to host the MLB All-Star Game, which will be, you know, one of these other really big events that is expected to bring in thousands of spectators to the city. And beyond that, actually, thinking, we're having a potential big redesign of FDR Park. There's a new proposal for a $64 million public swimming pool along the Schuylkill River. Like, who is thinking strategically about how to leverage all of this activity for the benefit of Philadelphians? It's really kind of like this idea of a cross-cutting role that kind of helps to get sports beyond the frame of just Parks and Rec.
More on sports culture in Philly after the break.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Sign up to The Economist for in-depth curated expert analysis of world events and topics ranging from business and culture to science and technology. You'll get the weekly digital edition, online-only articles, curated newsletters on politics, the markets, science, culture, and China, and full access to The Economist Podcast Plus. The Economist is independent journalism for independent thinking. Go to economist.com and get your first month free.
So, Diana, tell me, what would a sports mayor do that the Parks and Recreation Department isn't already doing?
Sure. And I should say, I'm a writer. I don't work in the city, and I am not so versed in the ins and outs of the org chart within city departments. But I would think of the sports mayor as really transcending the Parks and Rec department. I think Parks and Rec does a great job of really thinking about the assets, the physical assets of Philadelphia's parks and recreation spaces. I think of the sports mayor as really being somebody who is participating in larger discussions about the strategy of sports in the city. And so that would go beyond your neighborhood park or neighborhood rec center, but it would include things like, how does the Philadelphia Marathon, for example, have some kind of community benefit or impact or involvement for regular Philadelphians. I was really inspired by looking at some other examples of ways in which other cities have tried to leverage the impact of major sporting events to benefit their communities. So, for example, in Paris is hosting the Olympics this summer, and they're using that as an opportunity to create a social impact endowment fund that individuals from the city can actually apply to for funding for their own community recreation opportunities. And I think that's like a really interesting example of how these kind of bigger events could be leveraged for regular citizens. And so I think that would go way beyond, say, like what Parks and Rec would necessarily do in the city, because they're really kind of focused on city assets.
I'm also a parent of athletes, and I do feel, though, like the city does have great sports programs available to our children. They get to compete on local, regional, and national levels. Like youth football is big in the city, cheerleading, basketball, even tennis and squash centers and gymnastics and baseball, softball, and soccer. Soccer is growing in popularity, just to name a few. But for me, it comes down to the price tag and the expenses. Like putting your child or children through sports programs can get very, very expensive. But we need something for them to do to keep them active, to keep them engaged, to learn all of the things, how to be a team player, that sort of thing. What would a Philly sports mayor do for youth sports?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because I also think that recreation is such a critical issue for young kids, just mentally, socially, And especially, I think, as a lot of people are really trying to think about how to manage kids' screen time, like recreation is such a key part of that. I would see this role as potentially connecting better to the Philadelphia school district around how our city schools are engaging youth, and thinking about leveraging some of the whether it's the spaces or the staff from the school district to kind of boost what kinds of affordable sports opportunities there might be for youth in the city. And I definitely want to say, like, I completely agree that Philadelphia is a fantastic place to, especially, in cities, to raise young kids and to get them involved in sports. But I think really the sort of call to action here around this piece was about thinking really strategically. And so I would love to make sure that we're kind of evaluating fully all of the various different types of sports impacts in the city, and thinking about how to maximize them, right? So, like, I love this idea, for example, of a pool on the Schuylkill River. That sounds really awesome.
That was a hot topic.
But it's, but let's just, be honest here. We also aren't fully funding our existing pools that we have in Philadelphia.
Right. So why would we bring another pool to that side of town?
Right. And how can we also leverage perhaps some of the potential for community benefits coming out of these kinds of stadium projects or these big major events that are coming in 2026 to think about this like bigger sports strategy for the city and how it's going to benefit Philadelphians.
So in what ways, though, can we actually build better community around recreation?
I think that there are some good examples of that Philadelphia is already doing, and maybe it's just sort of a question of thinking about how to expand it. So, for example, I know that there's a program that's run with the Fairmount Parks Conservancy and the Parks and Rec Department called We Walk Philadelphia, which encourages people to walk in different neighborhood parks. It only runs for part of the summer and it's not everywhere. And I could imagine that being, a much bigger type of program in the city. So I think that maybe the first thing to do would be to find out, like, what are the things that are already working? Like, for example, those public pools that we know that are so important to the city, and kind of how do we make sure that the infrastructure that we already have, the programs that we already have, is being used to the max. And then start to think a little bit more about what other kinds of new opportunities there might be. And I think one of the other things that's really important is to figure out, ways to empower regular residents who are already excited about recreation to actually be able to, manifest what they want to see. I talk about in the article the example of pickleball. I don't play pickleball, but
love pickleball.
Okay. It seems like a great sport, and I love that it just seems really easy. I have a parking lot on my corner, and I've seen people put up a net in the parking lot and, just kind of try to get a little bit of a game
innovative.
On. Right. But it's like, for people who are trying to recreate in our city already and who are asking for more, how can we kind of leverage that community interest that already exists and kind of make it happen? I think that would be really powerful.
Are you optimistic, though, about the future of sports culture here in Philly?
I am. I'm really excited about all the opportunities that are coming down the pike. And I feel like that's all the more reason why we need to kind of pause and say, okay, like, I don't want to look back in 2028 and look at this and say, like, what was the impact of that? Like, for example, the NFL draft that happened a couple of years ago on the Parkway. A huge thing. What have been the lasting legacies of these kinds of programs in the city? I don't know. There may have been some, but I think that it would be great to say, like, we capitalized on all of the sports teams that came through in 2026, and that these, one or two new stadium districts were a turning point in terms of Philadelphians' access and culture recreation. that I think is really what this is about, is recognizing that we're in a pretty special, sweet moment here where maybe, in fact, all of the momentum that we've had for so long around our sports culture is really kind of coming to a head. And I think it's just a great opportunity to make the most of it.
That was Diana Lynn, writer and urban policy specialist. Thank you so much for joining me on CityCast Philly.
Thanks for having me.
You can check out more of Diana's work on her Substack, The New Urban Order. That's all for today here on CityCast Philly. Let us know what you think of this episode. Does Philly need a sports mayor? Share this with a friend. Rate the show, leave us a review, and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to sign up for our morning newsletter, Hey Philly, to learn more about what else Philly's talking about. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.